August 1944. E012 a.m., northern France. An Allied transport glides across moonless sky. A single crate tumbles from blackout sky into occupied grapevines heavy with unpicked fruit. Label reads, "Signal flares." Inside a pistol that cost $2.10, built in 6 seconds cheaper than combat boots, yet capable of collapsing an empire built on fear. A French farmer claws through soil with hands still blistered from his brother's grave. His brother was shot 2 weeks ago for hiding grain. His village lives under curfew. German patrol boots echo 4 blocks away every 4 hours. Curfew violations mean execution at dawn. He finds the Liberator. 1 shot. No sights, no rifling, no second chance. If this scrap of stamped steel kills 1 guard tonight, occupation doctrine fractures. Patrol routes shift. Paranoia spreads. The entire system of control begins to bleed. If it fails, his family vanish into Gestapo trucks before dawn. 4 yards separate him from a German soldier walking alone in the dark. 10 seconds to load. 1 trigger pull to decide whether a $2 weapon can terrorize an army or whether desperation dies silent in the dirt. The question burning through occupied Europe isn't whether cheap guns work. It's whether ordinary people armed with almost nothing can force tyrants to fear their own shadows. In 1942-1945, across occupied Europe and the Pacific, resistance movements are dying. Not from lack of courage, from lack of weapons. Arms are scarce, rifles cost $200, supply lines stretch across oceans. Every crate dropped is a crate not sent to invasion forces preparing to storm Fortress Europe. Allied command faces a calculation that devours sleep. How do you arm desperate civilians without crippling the armies meant to liberate them? The numbers are brutal and unforgiving. A Thompson submachine gun, $200. Production time hours. Training required extensive. A Colt .45 pistol, $15. Shipping weight substantial. Risk of capture catastrophic. In France, partisans hide in cellars waiting for weapons that never arrive. In Greece, fighters retreat to mountain caves with bare hands. In the Philippines, guerrillas watch Japanese patrols pass armed only with rage and bamboo spears. They're not asking for tanks. They're begging for anything that fires. Meanwhile, German doctrine is mathematically efficient and morally monstrous. For every soldier killed by resistance, 10 civilians are executed. Villages suspected of aiding partisans are burned. Entire families disappear into labor camps. Resistance without weapons isn't heroism. It's suicide by installments. Every execution makes the survivors more desperate. Every burned village makes weapons more critical. Every day without arms pushes networks closer to collapse. The dilemma crushes Allied planners like a vice. Arm them, too little uprisings suffocate before D-Day. Supply lines collapse. Intelligence networks die. The entire strategy of internal sabotage crumbles. Arm them too much and reprisals consume populations faster than liberation can reach them. In Washington, OSS Director William Donovan stares at reports from occupied territories. The pattern is unmistakable. Resistance cells are collapsing not from German pressure, but from despair. They need hope. They need agency. They need something to fight back with, but conventional weapons are impossible. Too expensive, too slow to produce, too complex to distribute at scale. Donovan authorizes an experiment so radical it borders on insanity. Design a firearm that costs less than a pair of boots, simple enough that untrained factory workers can build it, cheap enough that losing 10,000 units is acceptable. The specifications sound like a joke drafted by someone who's never held a gun. Single shot, smooth bore barrel, no sights, no safety, no ejector. Maximum effective range, 4 yards close enough to smell your target's breath. Armory officers call it fantasy. Ballistics experts predict it'll explode in users' hands. Resistance liaisons warn it's a death warrant disguised as hope. But one voice cuts through the doubt. If we give them nothing, they die without fighting back. If we give them this, some die fighting, and some survive long enough to seize real weapons. The project moves forward. Codename Liberator. Not because it will liberate territories, but because it might liberate the human will to resist one desperate point-blank shot at a time. The clock is running. D-Day approaches. Resistance networks need weapons before Allied boots hit Normandy beaches, or the entire invasion plan risks landing in territories too broken to rise. The question isn't whether a $2 pistol is adequate. The question is whether giving desperate people inadequate weapons is better than giving them nothing at all. June 1942. Anderson, Indiana. Guide Lamp Division of General Motors receives an order that defies every principle of firearms manufacturing. 1 million pistols, 11 weeks. Workers stare at blueprints on factory floors still hot from headlight production. The specifications make veterans laugh and engineers pale. No machining, no rifling, no finish. Just stamped steel bent like automobile fenders. George Hyde strips away everything. No moving parts beyond a firing pin, no extraction, no magazine. 23 components, all flat, all simple enough that yesterday's car assembler becomes today's armorer. The barrel a smooth steel tube, the trigger a bent lever, the grip two stamped halves welded in seconds. Production time per unit 6.6 seconds. Workers fear they're building suicide devices. Officers mock it as scrap with delusions. Ballistics experts predict catastrophic failure. Hyde test fires the prototype. The recoil nearly shatters his wrist. The barrel scorches after 3 rounds. Accuracy beyond 10 feet is prayer, not prediction. But it fires. At point-blank range, accuracy is irrelevant. The factory explodes into motion. Presses stamp steel at automotive speed. Welders seal grips faster than heartbeats. Assembly workers move with muscle memory borrowed from peacetime. 1 million pistols, 11 weeks. The math is insane. The pace is relentless. Crates stack in warehouses. OSS couriers move them under darkness. Labels lie medical supplies, signal flares, anything but truth. July 1943. The drops begin. C-47 transports knife through darkness over the channel. Bomb bays open. Crates tumble into French countryside, Greek mountains, Polish forests. Some parachutes fail. Steel scatters like seeds of violence. Some land in rivers. Some reach German patrols within hours, triggering sweeps that consume villages. Others reach desperate hands. A Greek partisan unwraps canvas in a mountain cave. Inside, crude steel, 5 rounds, and a cartoon instruction sheet. No words, just images any illiterate farmer understands. Insert round. Cock pin. Fire at touching distance. Push casing out with stick. Take the enemy's weapon. The instructions are brutally clear. This is not a weapon for firefights. This is a weapon for assassination. 4 yards, 1 breath, 1 shot, 1 chance. Resistance cells rehearse in freezing cellars. Hands tremble. They practice the 10-second reload that separates survival from execution. The pistol feels wrong. Too light, too crude, too much like holding your own death. But it's more than they had yesterday. August 1943, northern France. A partisan hides in a barn loft watching a German soldier inspect grain below. The Liberator feels like a toy made by children. 4 yards separate them. The partisan descends, silent, each step an eternity. 3 yards. The soldier turns. 2 yards. Eyes widen. 1 yard. The partisan fires. The explosion shatters silence. The soldier drops. His carabiner 98K clatters across wood. The partisan stands frozen in gunsmoke and disbelief. He just killed a man with $2 of stamped steel. He takes the rifle, the ammunition, the sidearm. One Liberator just armed a fighter with $200 of German weaponry. The equation shifts, but the price comes immediately. Dawn. German troops surround the village. 12 civilians against a bullet-scarred wall. The officer's voice is calm, practiced. Someone here is hiding weapons. 1 hour to surrender them. Silence, the kind that knows what comes next. Executions begin as sun rises over occupied France. This is the Liberator's true mathematics. Every successful ambush invites massacre. Every stolen rifle is purchased with civilian blood, yet resistance networks signal for more drops. Because passive submission is also death. Just slower, just quieter, just more certain. The drops multiply across occupied territories. Poland, a Liberator kills a rail depot guard. Saboteurs derail a supply train carrying 40 tons of ammunition to the Eastern Front. Philippines guerrillas coordinate ambushes with Liberators. Within weeks, captured rifles arm entire companies. Greece Liberators become currency, traded for food shelter intelligence. An underground economy blooms in occupied shadow, but the invisible impact dwarfs the visible. German officers notice patterns. Sentries found dead. No witnesses. No organized attacks. Just sudden violence and vanishing killers. Civilians who seemed harmless become lethal overnight. Trust evaporates. Patrols double. Checkpoints multiply. Soldiers who walked in pairs now move in squads, scanning every shadow, every doorway, every face. Occupation demands manpower. Every soldier hunting phantom weapons is a soldier not defending beaches. Every sweep bleeds resources from frontline divisions. The Liberator doesn't win battles. It hemorrhages enemy strength from within. Gestapo files swell with reports. Intelligence officers interrogate thousands. Entire divisions burn weeks searching for caches that may not exist. The pistol becomes ghost. Nightmare. German soldiers see threats in every face. Is the baker armed? The shopkeeper? The priest? The child? The question corrodes morale faster than combat ever could. Occupation doctrine built on certainty begins fracturing from a weapon that costs less than breakfast. Not from firepower, from doubt, from the realization that anyone anywhere could be carrying death in their pocket, and that fear, invisible, unquantifiable, corrosive, starts eating the occupation from inside. The FP-45 Liberator exists because George Hyde understands something most weapons designers refuse to accept. Complexity kills mass production. Every moving part demands machining time. Every tolerance requires skilled labor. Every finish consumes hours occupied Europe doesn't have. Hyde strips the pistol to brutal essence. A tube, a pin, a spring, a trigger. Smoothbore barrel, no rifling. Stamped frame, no forging. Single firing pin under spring tension. Total machining time, 0. Total skilled labor, 0. Workers who assembled headlights 48 hours ago now build firearms. Training takes 4 hours. Presses stamp steel at automotive speed. What emerges is ugly, brutal, functional. Hyde test fires the first unit. Recoil nearly fractures his wrist. The barrel grows too hot after 3 rounds. Accuracy beyond arm's length is impossible. But at 4 yards, it puts .45 caliber holes in human targets. At $2.10 per unit, perfection isn't the mission. Adequate lethality is. OSS designs distribution around brutal realism. Each pistol ships with 5 rounds, a cartoon instruction sheet, a wooden dowel. No words, just images transcending literacy. Insert round, cock pin, fire at point blank, push casing out with stick. Take the enemy's weapon. The fifth instruction is the entire strategy. The Liberator isn't meant to win firefights, it's meant to procure real weapons. You don't fight with a Liberator, you murder with it, then steal something worth fighting with. 5 spare rounds hide in the grip, enough for 1 ambush and 1 emergency. OSS drills the philosophy. This is a procurement tool. Use it once at breathing distance. Acquire a rifle. Disappear before the body cools. The doctrine spreads through resistance networks. French partisans identify isolated targets, lone sentries, supply drivers, personnel walking alone after curfew. The approach becomes ritual. Shadow the target. Wait for isolation. Close to arm's length. Fire into the skull. Take everything. Vanish. No heroics, just calculated violence and immediate extraction. The captured weapon is the prize. A Carabiner 98K sustains a fighter for months. An MP-40 equips a sabotage cell. The Liberator is disposable. Its value ends when a better weapon is seized. In the Philippines, Wendell Fertig transforms the concept into systematic warfare. Fighters organize into hunter-killer pairs. One carries the Liberator and accepts suicide risk. The other provides reconnaissance and escape. Targets selected by weapon value. Officers carry pistols acceptable. Sergeants carry rifles better. Vehicle crews carry submachine guns optimal. Ambush doctrine refines through blood. Approach from behind. Fire into the brainstem. Extract in under 30 seconds. Bury the Liberator if pursuit seems likely. Within 6 months, Fertig's force explodes from 24 fighters to over 3,000 guerrillas armed with captured Japanese equipment. Official reports credit airdrops. The truth is simpler. Every weapon traces back to a kill made with a $2 pistol. In Greece, German reprisals are swift and collective. Greek partisans adapt the Liberator into psychological warfare. A pistol appears on a German officer's desk overnight. No note. The message screams, "We can reach you anywhere." Another planted in a barracks. Discovered at morning inspection, it triggers security lockdown. Soldiers turn on each other. Trust disintegrates. The pistol becomes symbol, not of strength, but of vulnerability. Even in resistance hands, it whispers, "If we can arm anyone, you can trust no one." OSS cannot measure success through conventional metrics, cannot count kills or track ambushes. But they can measure German response. Checkpoint inspections triple, random searches increase 20-fold, curfews extend, troop rotations accelerate. These are reactions to pervasive uncertainty German intelligence cannot quantify. The Liberator's strategic genius lies in its ambiguity. German estimates range from 5,000 to 500,000. The truth, 1 million produced, perhaps $300,000 delivered, is unknowable. They assume worst-case scenarios. Every civilian becomes potential threat. Every interaction carries assassination risk. Every street could hide ambush. Paranoia metastasizes. In some districts, soldiers refuse patrols without armor. In others, they abandon night patrols, ceding darkness to resistance. In contested regions, they retreat to compounds and surrender the countryside. This is the Liberator's true brilliance. It doesn't defeat armies through firepower. It forces armies to defeat themselves through fear. By creating conditions where occupation becomes psychologically unsustainable, it accelerates internal collapse of Axis control before Allied invasion arrives. The weapon itself is crude, disposable, barely adequate. The strategy behind it is devastatingly sophisticated. It proves that in asymmetric warfare, the enemy's imagination can be weaponized as effectively as bullets and far more cheaply. The Liberator's true power is not the bullet. It is the rumor. Spring 1944. German intelligence offices across occupied Europe compile reports. The pattern is unmistakable. Sentries found dead, weapons missing, no witnesses. The attacks are too isolated to be coordinated, too successful to be random. Conclusion: civilians are armed, but with what inspections reveal: nothing. Raids find no arsenals. Informants report no smuggling, yet attacks continue. Gestapo report from Lyon. Weapon unknown, attacker fires once and disappears, cannot determine source. Warsaw. Civilian population may possess crude single-shot firearms. Distribution extent unclear. Athens. Assume all civilians potentially armed. The reports circulate. Commanders adjust doctrine. Soldiers absorb the implication. Anyone could be carrying a weapon. Trust erodes. German soldiers see threats everywhere. A man reaching into his coat becomes potential ambush. A woman approaching a checkpoint becomes suspicious. Frontline units request transfers to avoid occupation duty. Morale reports note increasing anxiety. Discipline incidents spike. Commanders authorize preemptive measures, random searches, earlier curfews, banned gatherings. These measures don't locate weapons. They radicalize neutral populations. Families who avoided resistance now shelter fighters. Villagers who stayed silent now provide intelligence. Workers who complied now sabotage production. The Liberator creates a feedback loop. Crackdowns alienate civilians. Alienated civilians support resistance. Resistance kills soldiers. Soldiers demand harsher crackdowns. The cycle accelerates. In the Philippines, the effect is more pronounced. Japanese occupation faces guerrilla warfare across thousands of islands. When liberators appear, Japanese commanders overestimate numbers dramatically. One captured pistol triggers regional sweep. Entire divisions diverted from defensive positions to hunt caches that don't exist. Wendell Fertig exploits this brilliantly. He deliberately leaves liberators where patrols will find them. Each discovery triggers panic. Troops redeploy. Supply lines disrupted. Preparations delayed. By October 1944, when American forces land, Japanese units are exhausted, scattered, demoralized by months chasing ghosts. In France, the effect is more subtle but equally significant. As D-Day approaches, German commanders face impossible calculation. How many troops for internal security without liberators? Minimal. With liberators, or the rumor, substantial. Entire divisions kept behind the Atlantic Wall to guard rail lines, factories, depots. Troops who could defend beaches instead patrol cities. June 6, 1944. Allied forces storm Normandy. German reinforcements arrived slower than planned. Some delayed by resistance, others held back by commanders fearing uprisings. The delay cost Germany the battle. Few will note that some miscalculations stem from fears of armed civilians, fears ignited by a $2 pistol. But the Liberator's impact is not uniformly positive. In some villages, possession triggers massacres. Poland, a partisan uses a Liberator to kill a soldier. Reprisal: 50 civilians executed. The partisan escapes. The village pays. Greece, a Liberator discovered during search. Family deported. Neighbors questioned. District locked down. The weapon promising liberation becomes death sentence for some who possess it. OSS planners justify it with cold arithmetic. Reprisals that tie down occupation forces save more lives than they cost. For families gunned down in reprisal, the arithmetic is irrelevant. The Liberator forces impossible choices. Use at risk reprisal. Hide at risk discovery. Surrender at risk suspicion. No safe option. Yet resistance networks continue using them because passive submission guarantees slow extinction. By spring 1944, the Liberator has achieved something no expensive weapon could. It has made occupation psychologically unsustainable. German soldiers no longer believe in security of territories they control, no longer trust populations they govern, no longer sleep soundly in barracks that could be infiltrated by anyone with a $2 gun. The empire built on intimidation now fears its own victims. And that fear more than any bullet begins to bring the empire down. Summer 1944. Northern France. The Allied breakout from Normandy accelerates. German forces retreat toward the Seine. Resistance groups race to support the advance. In a collapsing barn outside Chartres, partisan Luc Moreau crouches beneath shattered beams. 19 years old. Carpenter's apprentice before the war. Now hunted. 3 days ago, his cell ambushed a supply truck, captured rifles, ammunition documents detailing German defensive positions. Intelligence relayed to Allied command. Yesterday, Gestapo arrested his sister. This morning, they came for him. He ran through fields, through vineyards, into this barn at the edge of a burned village. Now boots crunch gravel outside. A German soldier enters, rifle ready, eyes scanning. Luke presses against rotting hay. His hand closes around the Liberator. Stamped steel. Cold, crude. One shot. The soldier moves closer. Methodical. 3 yards. Luke's breath catches. The soldier hears. Turns. 2 yards. Luke rises. The pistol feels impossibly light. The soldier's rifle swings toward him. 1 yard. Luke fires. The explosion is deafening. Dust rains from rafters. Recoil slams into his wrist. The soldier collapses. His rifle strikes the floor. Luke stands frozen. Gunpowder mixes with hay and decay. His ears ring. Hands shake. He just killed a man with a $2 pistol. Blood pools across packed earth. Luke takes the rifle, takes the ammunition, takes the sidearm. He leaves the Liberator beside the body. Outside, voices shout. More soldiers. Luke runs. This scene repeats across occupied Europe that summer. Not identically, but similarly. Greece, a partisan uses a Liberator to kill a sentry at a mountain checkpoint. The alarm allows an Allied reconnaissance team to escape. Poland, a resistance fighter, shoots a Gestapo informant. The network survives another month. Philippines, a guerrilla ambushes a Japanese officer. Stolen documents reveal invasion plans that help American forces save hundreds. Each act is small, isolated, desperate, but the cumulative effect is undeniable. Resistance stiffens, harassment grows. Occupying forces retreat from shadows they can no longer predict. Not every story ends like Luke's. Near Krakow, a partisan attempts an ambush. The pistol misfires. By nightfall, 30 villagers are executed. Philippines, a guerrilla shoots a Japanese soldier. The soldier survives. The guerrilla dies 3 days later, starving in a jungle cave. France, a resistance fighter, uses a Liberator to kill a German sergeant. The unit burns the entire village. 74 civilians die. These failures are erased from official histories. The successes celebrated. The dead forgotten. But both are part of the Liberator's legacy. For every successful ambush, there are failed attempts. For every captured weapon, reprisals. For every act of resistance, consequences that ripple through communities for years. The Liberator does not promise safety, does not guarantee success, offers only a chance, a single shot against an empire. And for thousands of desperate people, that chance is enough. Luc Moreau survives the war. He never speaks about the barn, never mentions the German soldier, never shows the scar on his wrist from the Liberator's recoil. He keeps the captured rifle hidden in his attic for 30 years. In 1974, his grandson asks about the war. Luke brings down the rifle, tells the story carefully, factually, without embellishment. It was a cheap gun, Made in America, cost almost nothing, but it saved my life. He does not mention it also cost 12 villagers their lives in reprisal 2 days later. Does not mention he still dreams about the soldier's eyes. Does not mention he cannot enter barns without his hand shaking. These are the costs official histories omit. These are the prices $2 pistols exact from those who use them. But Luke does not regret pulling the trigger, because the alternative capture, torture, execution was certain. The Liberator gave him uncertainty, and in war, uncertainty is survival. Most Liberators never fire a shot. Many rust in fields where parachutes failed. Others are discovered by patrols and destroyed. Some are buried by fighters who never face the moment requiring their use. Thousands are melted for scrap after liberation. But some change everything. A guard falls, a rifle is seized, a family escapes, an intelligence network survives, an ambush succeeds. Each small victory is invisible in the war's grand narrative. But for the people involved, it is everything. The partisan who shoots a sentry and escapes. The villager who uses a hidden liberator in final desperation. The guerrilla who builds an arsenal from stolen weapons starting with one crude shot. These stories don't appear in official reports, but they matter. The cost is equally invisible. For every successful ambush, there are reprisals. Families executed. Villages burned. Communities terrorized. In some regions, possession of a liberator is a death sentence not from using it but from being discovered with it. German occupation forces issue standing orders. Any civilian found with a weapon is executed immediately. Any family suspected of hiding weapons is deported. Enforced ruthlessly. In France, Gestapo raids uncover liberators in farmhouses, cellars, crypts. Owners shot. Neighbors questioned. Villages under collective punishment. In Poland, resistance members caught with liberators are publicly hanged. Slow visible announced in advance. In Greece, German sweeps through mountain villages. Every house searched. Liberators found trigger immediate massacre. The numbers are horrific. For every German soldier killed by a liberator, 8 to 12 civilians die in reprisal. The pattern is consistent. Resistance costs lives. OSS planners know this. They justify it with strategic calculus. Tying down occupation forces saves more lives long-term than reprisals cost short-term. The math is cold. The consequences are human. Families who hide liberators weigh impossible choices. Use it and risk annihilation. Surrender it and risk suspicion. Keep it hidden and risk discovery. There is no safe path. Yet many choose resistance, because the alternative, slow submission, gradual erasure, eventual death, offers no dignity. The liberator does not promise survival. It promises agency, the ability to fight back, the capacity to resist, the choice to die standing rather than kneeling. For some, that choice is worth any cost. By the end of 1944, the tide has shifted. Allied forces liberate France, Greece, the Philippines. Resistance networks emerge. Weapons caches are inventoried. Among rifles, explosives, ammunition, officials find thousands of liberators. Rusted, unused, forgotten. Official reports are dismissive. Limited tactical value. Crude manufacture. Minimal impact. But commanders on the ground know differently. They see the effect in German after-action reports. The paranoia, the redeployed troops, the delayed reinforcements. They hear stories from liberated villages, the ambushes, the escapes, the small victories that kept resistance alive. They understand what official reports miss. The liberator's value was never measured in enemy casualties. It was measured in hope, sustained morale, preserved resistance, kept alive until liberation arrived. In the Philippines, Wendell Fertig submits a classified report detailing 3 years of guerrilla operations. Buried in the report, initial weapons procurement was facilitated by airdrop single-shot firearms. No mention of the Liberator by name. No acknowledgement of psychological impact. Just clinical notation. But Fertig knows. His fighters know. The Japanese commanders who diverted thousands of troops know. The $2 pistol changed the war in ways official histories will never capture, because its greatest impact was not what it did. It was what the enemy feared it could do. And that fear, invisible, unquantifiable, corrosive bled resources, eroded morale, accelerated collapse from within. The FP-45 Liberator production ends in 1945. The pistols are forgotten. For 2 decades, they exist only as museum curiosities. Then the Cold War reignites the concept. In 1964, Vietnam. The CIA develops the deer gun near-identical design. Single shot, smoothbore, stamped steel dropped into Laos and Cambodia, used exactly like the Liberator close ambush steel weapons disappear. Some succeed, others die in reprisal. The program ends in 1968, but the legacy persists. Throughout the Cold War, the Liberator's philosophy appears worldwide. Mass-produced disposable firearms for asymmetric warfare. Soviet planners study it. Design stamped steel weapons. The concept spreads to proxy conflicts across Africa, Asia, Latin America. Modern special operations still teach the doctrine a crude weapon used wisely beats an expensive weapon unused. The technical legacy is equally significant. Before 1942, firearms manufacturing was craft, precision machining, hand fitting, skilled labor. The Liberator proved stamped steel could replace craftsmanship. Speed could replace precision. Post-war design embraces these lessons. Stamped receivers become standard. Automotive techniques transform armories. The AK-47, designed in 1947, owes intellectual debt to the Liberator. Not in appearance, but philosophy, reliability through simplicity, production through stamping. Soviet planners studied Allied programs. The Liberator's production statistics, 1 million units in 11 weeks, were impossible to ignore. The AK-47 becomes the most produced firearm in history. Over 100 million manufactured, built on crude effectiveness beating complex failure. The Liberator's ghost lives in every stamped steel weapon since 1945, but its psychological legacy is more profound. The idea that civilians can be armed cheaply at scale fundamentally alters insurgency doctrine. The Liberator proves desperation can be weaponized. This lesson echoes through every post-war insurgency. From Algeria to Afghanistan, Nicaragua to Nepal, fighters understand you don't need sophisticated weapons to begin. You need crude weapons to steal sophisticated ones. Crude weapon kills soldier. Better weapon seized. Sell armed. Operations expand. Occupying force overreacts. Civilians radicalize. Resistance grows. The Liberator didn't invent this cycle, but it proved the cycle could be industrialized. Historians debate combat effectiveness. Perhaps 25,000 were used, perhaps fewer. But strategic effectiveness is undeniable. German forces diverted thousands of troops to internal security. Japanese commanders delayed defensive preparations. Entire divisions consumed by fears of armed civilians. Every soldier guarding rail lines wasn't defending beaches. Every unit sweeping villages wasn't reinforcing fronts. The Liberator bled the Axis from within, not through firepower, through fear. Modern planners still study the operation as psychological warfare case study. How do you force enemies to divert resources without engagement? How do you create uncertainty that paralyzes decisions? How do you weaponize paranoia? The Liberator provides answers. Distribute enough threat to force worst-case assumptions. Create ambiguity about scale. Let enemy imagination do the work. These principles now guide information warfare cyber operations asymmetric strategies worldwide. The $2 pistol's legacy extends far beyond its physical form. It proves innovation and desperation can reshape warfare. That crude simplicity sometimes beats sophisticated complexity. Most importantly, it demonstrates occupation is fragile. Even the most powerful force cannot control a population that refuses submission, especially when armed even minimally. This lesson terrifies authoritarian regimes to this day. It's why occupying powers confiscate civilian weapons. Why resistance movements prioritize weapons acquisition. Why revolution's first act is seizing arms. The Liberator proved firepower is less important than will. That resistance requires only a spark, and a spark can be delivered for $2.10. Decades later, a rusted Liberator emerges from a French field. A farmer unearths it while plowing, steel pitted with corrosion. Grip cracked, barrel clogged with soil. He brings it to a local museum. The curator traces its history. Dropped in August 1944. Parachute failed. Crate shattered. Buried for 60 years. It never fired a shot. Never killed a soldier. Never changed a single life. But it existed. And that existence mattered. Somewhere a German officer filed a report about weapons drops. Somewhere a patrol was rerouted. Somewhere a civilian was questioned. The pistol never left the earth. But the fear of what it represented shaped decisions, consumed resources. This is the Liberator's final paradox. Its power was never in what it did, it was in what the enemy believed it could do. The curator places it in a display case, next to a Thompson, a Colt 45, a Carabiner 98K. The Thompson draws admiration. The Colt draws respect. The Carabiner draws interest. The Liberator draws confusion. It looks crude, cheap, inadequate. But the curator knows its story. This pistol and hundreds of thousands like it represented something the Axis could never defeat: the willingness of ordinary people to resist when resistance seemed impossible. It proved empires built on force are vulnerable to the simplest acts of defiance. That occupation requires not just military superiority, but psychological dominance. And that dominance can be shattered by a $2 pistol. The Liberator did not win the war, but it contributed to victory in ways statistics cannot measure. It gave hope to the hopeless, armed the desperate, forced occupiers to fear the occupied. Tyranny depends on submission. When submission ends, even armed with only crude steel and desperate courage, tyranny begins to fall. The Liberator was never meant to be a great weapon. It was meant to be enough. Enough to kill a guard. Enough to seize a rifle. Enough to keep resistance alive until liberation arrived, and it was. In barns and cellars, in fields and forests, thousands held Liberators in shaking hands and made impossible choices. Some survived, some died, all resisted, and that resistance, crude, desperate, inadequate, but unyielding, helped bring down an empire that believed itself invincible. Years later, veterans gather. They rarely speak of the Liberator. It embarrasses them, a reminder of desperation. But in quiet moments, some admit the truth. They remember the sound of a Liberator firing in darkness, the sight of a partisan rising with a stolen rifle, the knowledge that civilians were fighting back with whatever they had. That knowledge sustained them, because it proved resistance was possible, that the enemy was not invincible, that even with a $2 gun, ordinary people could strike back. The Liberator was never a symbol of strength, it was a symbol of refusal. Refusal to submit, refusal to surrender, refusal to accept that occupation was permanent. And sometimes refusal is the most powerful weapon of all. The rusted pistol sits in the museum case, silent, forgotten by most. But for those who understand its story, it speaks volumes. It reminds us that empires fall not only to armies, but to the quiet defiance of ordinary people who refuse to surrender even when all they hold is a single shot made of scrap metal and desperation. Sometimes the crudest weapons carry the sharpest truths.